So far we've covered the properties of color, we've talked about color harmonies and how we mix colors together, and we've done this all in kind of an abstract sort of way. Now, when we start putting colors together next to each other or in an environment, we start seeing that these colors are going to do some really interesting things and almost play tricks on the eye. So following the discussion of luminosity contrast, one of the things that I find really interesting is this concept of brightness versus lightness. Now you might be thinking, well, those are the same thing, but in fact they're not. So lightness is basically our luminosity. So it's a measure of how light or how dark a color is, but it's always going to be measured relative to pure white. Now brightness is always going to be contextual. So basically brightness is going to be how light or dark color looks relative to the environment that it's in. Let's take a look at how this manifests in some actual images. So we've got this image here of a scene sitting outside. The sky looks pretty light. And if we take a look at this against a dark background, you might look at it and say, okay, well, that sky is pure white. Now, if we switch it up and we put it against a white background, you'll actually see that that sky has a fair bit of color in it and it's not pure white. Here's another image, and let's do the same thing here. We're looking at this particular part of the sky right behind our surfers, and we're going to take a look at it on the gray background, and once again, it's going to look white. Now, let's take a look and put it on a white background. And in fact, it is pure white. And just to drive this point home a little bit further, let's take a look at these two images side by side. Not only are you going to see the significant difference in luminosity in the sky, but you'll also see that our vineyard image actually has a tint of greenish yellow to the sky, whereas the sky on the right-hand side, our surfer shot, has more of a cyan cast to it around the edges. So another really interesting phenomenon that occurs with color, and this doesn't have anything to do with science or rhyme or reason, this is just a purely perceptual thing, is the sense of weight given to certain colors. Darker colors feel heavier, they have a gravity to them. We want to see them physically on the bottom part of an image. And conversely, lighter colors like yellows or anything that's pastel or has a higher luminosity, we want to see physically on the top of an image. Think about it. If you're out and you're looking at your environment, the sky tends to be brighter relative to the ground. So maybe this is an environmental thing and it's just kind of based on our own perception. Another example would be sort of how we perceive shadows. So we've got this big light source up in the sky, we've got the sun, and it's casting shadows downward. So there's kind of a gravity to it, and those shadows are going to be darker. And so we want that weight at the bottom to really anchor our image and keep it grounded for us. That's just kind of how we perceive images and we perceive light, and that translates into color. Another one of these really interesting color phenomena that has to deal with kind of the spatial relation of colors is our warmer colors tend to feel like they're coming towards us. They're popping off of the page. They're really bright. They're in your face. So red's a really good example of this. We associate red with fire and with danger. And so we have this kind of thought in our mind that red is really going to pop out. Conversely, blues, neutrals feel like they're fading away into the background and they're further back. There's a phenomenon called atmospheric perspective, and this is what happens kind of in the real world. So if you're standing on a vista and you're looking out across the distance at a mountain range, for instance, the further your eye goes back, the further away that landscape is, it's going to start turning this shade of blue, it's going to start losing detail, and it's going to recede into the frame. And again, because of that blue color, it's fading away, and this is what our eye is doing all the time when it sees different colors. Another one of these interesting phenomena that occurs is what Itten likes to call simultaneous contrast. And this kind of manifests in a number of different ways, but the gist of it is that when you place one color directly adjacent to another color, they're going to have this interesting interplay, and one of the colors is going to affect the perception of the other one. And the way this most typically plays out is the complement of the one hue wants to influence the other hue. So for instance, if you're looking at red and yellow next to each other, that yellow, even if it's a pure yellow, it might have a little bit of green in it to your eye because the red is saying, well, I want to see the complement of that, and that's green. And so it's going to kind of infuse it into that yellow color. The early Christian church adopted the Roman symbolism of white as the color of purity, sacrifice, and virtue. The white unicorn was a common subject in historical manuscripts, paintings, and tapestries, symbolizing purity, chastity, and grace. The absoluteness of white appealed to modernist painters like Malevich and Mondrian in their starkly simple abstract works. White has often been associated with sterility and a sense of coldness, being the color of snow and ice. We bleach things to not only make them whiter, but to sterilize them. White had long been a color of peace, signified in the Bible by a white dove. In the Middle Ages, a white flag meant surrender or signaled for a peaceful parley on the battlefield.